Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast, hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob. He's Joe, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Joe, I come in somber today, but I ask you, how are you doing?
Fine. I gave up on the Reds a couple, 3, 4 weeks ago when we talked about them. Just, wasn't going to let my hopes get back up. And now it's pretty official after this past week and even some comments from the front office about what their plans are for the next week or so before the trade deadline on the 30th this year. So the good thing is that college football video game was awesome. It came out last week. It gave me something to not have to, something else to vent my frustrations at because, doing it with the Reds can be sometimes frustrating to do.
Yeah, that is, I think, an understatement. It's been it's been a bit of a struggle, Joe. We are exactly, or not exactly, we are exactly 1 day and a week from the trade deadline. We knew the Reds needed to come out and probably win 2 of 3 for them to consider going after it. That would have put them at 1 game under, Joe. Instead, they are now. Well, we'll go into it here in a second. I'm not going to spoil it as I do the quick recap. But question of the day for those of you who are listening and or watching, please listen in the comments below or on Twitter. How do you feel about the Reds selling? This is a theoretical question because we have not given exactly where our thoughts are. But let us know if the Reds were to sell, how would you feel about it? So, let's hop into the National Series. It was a disappointing one, I think, to say the least. Game 1, you're going up against Patrick Corbin, one of the worst pitchers in baseball for a while. For some reason, David Bell decided to put Frankie Montas as the starting pitcher to bring us back out. When these games are that important, it doesn't make sense to me. So, okay, we continue on here. Reds lose 8-5. Resigns with a big double. Couple good hits, honestly, from the team, but realistically, nothing was going. Tony Santillan looked pretty solid. That was good, at least. But Reds somehow scrounged 4 runs in the ninth. They almost brought it back, but the fourth and fifth innings were just too much to overcome. As Frankie Montas got shelled after the first 3. Then, another 1-run stunner. The Reds I think they're 8-19 in 1-run games, which is just unacceptable, in my most humble opinion. But Tyler Stevenson with a big home run, Ellie De La Cruz with a home run. Lodolo, they have got to figure out what is happening to him during the second time through the order. It has been rough. He did go 6 innings, but gave up 4 runs, 8 strikeouts, and a home run. Fernando Cruz just doesn't have it anymore, and Justin Wilson ultimately gave up the run at the end of the game, and the Reds were unable to bring it back. The Sunday game, Noelvi Marte gave the Reds a lead with his second home run of the year. He is starting to hit a little bit more, Joe, which has been nice to see. Stu Fairchild as well with a home run continues to do good work. Jake Irvin looking like he is going to be a prime trade deadline candidate. And the Nationals will have to decide whether or not he's going to be part of their future rotation or going to help them build out the rest of their team. Andrew Abbott looked and did what he almost always does, Joe. Scattered 6 hits across 6.2 innings. 6 2/3 innings, sorry. 2 runs given up. Neither of them were earned based on the really bad error from Noelvi Marte. 3 walks, 1 strikeout, dropped that ERA down to 3.19, and then Lucas Sims, who had been red hot, gives up a home run, and Justin Wilson yet again comes in and gives up yet another run. So, or not, Simpson gave up the home run. Sorry, Wilson gave up the home run, but Sims got them in trouble. So, we were swept by one of the worst teams in baseball, a team that we thought would be trading players even over the break. They did not, Joe, and I'm going to ask you this. It dropped us down to 6 games under. By some miracle, we are still only 4 games out, Joe. I do not know how to express my confusion about being 6 games out. I mean, we're not one of the worst teams in baseball, but we're at that tier right above it, basically, in my mind. And so I guess the first question that came to mind for me was, why should fans keep watching? Because this team is not making a lot of good decisions. They're having a lot of bad play. I think Marte specifically is starting to crack under the pressure a little bit. To be honest with you, he just doesn't look right. He's a much better player than what he's shown. Um, I mean, you look at the statistics for the players, like without Ellie, without a 3-week run there from Jamer, and without Spence, we're pretty bad, honestly. It's just been rough. Jake Fraley is continuing to hit, but I don't know. We were starting Mike Ford, and he's now in Korea, I believe, or Japan. I don't remember which one, but he hit a home run in the MPB League, I think is what it's called. So, why should the fans continue to watch, Joe, in your mind?
I mean, if you're looking for a team to compete, you're probably not going to watch. That's just the kind of the blunt way of putting it right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
they're not ready. They don't have enough pieces. The front office has said they're going to be selling guys at the deadline who are in the last year of their contracts. We'll get to that in a little bit here. If you're a fan who is getting tired of that and like burnt out of like, oh, we always have these teams of potential and then everything gets torn down. I understand. It's tough being a Reds fan. It is not easy, especially these last, I don't know, 10 or so years since like the 2014 team. It has not been fun. So I get it. If you are a fan of baseball in general, you keep on watching. If you are a fan of, we have a lot of young talent with those three starting pitchers with Ellie, some other guys. Matt McClain maybe coming back, which again that maybe changes this whole series. Maybe changes whether he comes back and when he does. We'll see how that affects things. That's why you might continue to watch, but it has been super frustrating. The fundamentals are awful. Guys making the wrong reads in the field. Bullpen coming in, having guys just not pitch well. Justin Wilson, Rob, we had talked about a guy that we didn't really want on the team with how many lefties we already had, and he's getting opportunities. He's blowing games. The offense is streaky. The reason why they were having some success in July was because they actually, I think, before the National Series started, they led Major League Baseball in home runs in July. Not sustainable. Something we've talked about as well. This team is not built for that type of power. Um, you know, Props to Tower Stevenson for really carrying a lot of that, but it's just not something we can do. So that's, you know, I guess a wild way of putting. Do not expect this team to go on a tear and start competing. We've had a couple good runs where we start hitting home runs, where we get teams, fans feeling like they're, going to be good. But then we do stupid things. Whether it is starting Frankie Montas in the first game back, like I didn't understand that he's been our worst starting pitcher, or fourth out of fifth best starting pitcher. I guess you could say the fifth
Yeah.
spot's been kind of up and down all year too. We have Nick Lodolo. We could have put in there. I know he specifically struggled in the fourth innings. And the second time he goes around the order, the back half of the order, he struggles, and then the third time through the order, the first guy's up. So pitchers 1, 2, and 3, knocking all the guys who were at the back end of the second half of the batting order for the second time around. And it seems like a mental hurdle. He did seem to take a step.
Mm-hmm.
We could have played Hunter. We could have played Hunter Green this weekend too. Like pitching in the All-Star game sucks, but he didn't really throw that many pitches. Let's be honest. So I just a lot of bad decisions from the front office, from David Bell, from the players themselves, and it just the tough schedule got to them. I think at a certain point, I think some of the bad play got to them. They just never fully put it together, and when it all comes down to it, that again, just like we talked about all season long, Rob, it is a organizational failure from top to bottom, and it's hard to pinpoint things, but hopefully changes are made because it's has not been fun watching these last 13 games, the 9 before the All-Star break, or again, the 10 before the All-Star break and the 3 against the Nationals, are against under 500 teams and a lot of bad teams. We won 5 of those games. You can't do that and be a good team. Like, you just can't. So, again, I didn't really have much hope for the rest of the season, but if you want to keep on watching, watch some of these young guys. I think in a couple years when Ellie's one of the best players in the world, and Hunter Green's an ace, everyone's gonna be like, I remember when he was first coming up, first figuring it out, and I remember watching him slowly figure it out that first, second, third year in the big leagues. That's why I think it'll be fun to watch this last back half of the year.
Yeah, I think that there's still some interesting and fun players to watch for the Reds. Like you said, they're not going to be trading any of the big three of our starters. Ellie's not going anywhere. Spencer Steer's not going anywhere. Tyler Stevenson is turning into one of the best catchers in baseball right now, right in front of our eyes. Like, you don't need to worry about him. The Reese Hines thing was fun, but The average is starting to come down. Well, I wouldn't say significantly. He had an okay weekend. I would say a normal weekend, in my estimation, Joe. For hitters. So, there's still young players to watch, and I think and we'll talk about the Reds trades here later because they will be making trades. I guarantee it at this point. They are going to probably trade for guys who are going to be ready sooner than later. To be honest with you, I can't imagine that they're going to be trading for really, younger guys. They might be taking some chance guys. Like I can see Will Benson type trades, top prospects that have been given up on type trades. So we'll talk about that here shortly. But I think for that reason, it'll be worth watching. And then just seeing, them make the progression, right? Like maybe you don't have to watch every single game, but catching every other game or catching when you can, I think is still good. So you kind of have an idea of who's doing what's going on, and getting ready for next year. Because the majority of these guys are going to be back next year. There are a lot of, I think, players who, even backup players. Like I fully expect Stu Fairchild to be back next year. I think he's played his role really well. I fully think that he'll be back in probably a similar role next year. Even somebody like a Jake Fraley, like, Noel V. Marte is going to continue to get chances. He's worth watching to see what happens. Rhys Hines, if this team does make some miracle run, it's going to be on those kind of guys. It's not going to be the Ellies and the Steers and the Stevensons. You're going to need the other guys to kind of step up. But I think, honestly, like it feels like our depth is getting a little exposed. So we're going to have to see what happens with these young guys, but that would be worth watching for me. And that's the reason why I've watched many, many years of them playing bad baseball. They should still win close. They should still go close to 500, I think, by the end of the season, because I think they'll make one more run that'll get them to right around 500. It won't be enough for them to get to the playoffs, but I think, they'll probably win like 78 games again or something like that, Joe. It's just coming out, and we're not trying to be complete downers, guys. There is still a very real chance that they can make it. But everybody has to start playing well. Like they have to somehow go into Atlanta and Tampa Bay this week and play out of their freaking minds. Like they got to win 4 out of the 6 games somehow. I just don't see that happening, but not to spoil anything, but that's the kind of stuff that has to happen. They have to basically win 4 out of every 6 games for the rest of the season, Joe, for them to make the playoffs at this point, in my estimation. And I just don't think this team has that kind of firepower in the lineup, because sadly the pitching has still been relatively good. It's just the hitting has really just not followed through this year whatsoever. So I would still watch, because I think there are young players. You're going to, like Joe said, remember, hey, Hunter Green started showing up. Next year, he's going to be in that category for NL Cy Young. I promise you, if he continues to make, I think, the big steps for watch his curveball, watch his splitter, see how those pitches continue to develop. And I think for Lodolo, see how he figures out his struggles. Andrew Abbott, he's been great at not giving up runs, but I still think that there are ways that he can be a little bit more dominant, a little bit more efficient, because you can't always rely on weak contact. It's a big part of your game, but occasionally you do need to get big strikeouts. And I'd like to see him start to kind of find maybe a new pitch, or, we'll see what happens throughout the rest of the season with him. There's still a lot of good reasons to watch the Reds, but if your reasons are that you only want to watch them to make the playoffs, then, well, you're probably shit out of luck, to be honest. So I think that'll probably wrap that one up. But I'm going to play into this one here, Joe, or I'm going to run us into this one. Does David Bell get fired at the end of the season? We've talked about it before. Them not making the playoffs, I think, is a huge sign. I think Krall coming out and saying what he did about the trade deadline, which we will get to here shortly, indicates to me that he is frustrated. I've never seen him come out and be this blunt this early on, like before. I know it's still a week before the trade deadline, but they are very tight-lipped about moves and everything else until things are actually done. So the fact that the rumors are coming out the way that they are makes me think that the team is frustrated. The ownership, like it feels like to me, while David Bell is not the linchpin, he is not the the one that is fully to blame. Dude, when I saw that Frankie Montas was starting on Friday, I almost lost it. I literally sat there with my head in my hand like this, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, the problem that I'm seeing, Joe, with a lot of this stuff is these are very fixable mistakes, very obvious things. Like, if you wanted your best chance at winning in the first game. Now, I know they probably threw Montas. I think the thinking was truly, we are facing Patrick Corbin. He is horrible. Montas is at least better than Corbin most of the time. We should expect him to be able to go out and get it done. And then their better two pitchers, we're going to line Lodolo and Abbott against them. I understand that. But bro, Hunter Green threw one inning. You go Abbott, Lodolo, and Green. Boom. That's how you go in there and get this series done. Because truthfully, if the Reds don't win at least 2 games, it doesn't matter if Hunter Green goes to Atlanta and pitches. It just doesn't. So, in my estimation, Joe, he should be fired. I will finally get on that bandwagon fully at this point. I'm tired of it. I want something new. Something has to change from top to bottom, and generally starting with the manager and coaching staff is the best way to do it. I know that can throw off players a little bit, just because there's a lot of routines that can change. There are stylistic things that can change. There are mentalities that can change. I would literally keep Colin Cowgill. That's it. And maybe Derek Johnson. I'll give DJ credit here. Those are the only 2 guys that I would keep at this point, because I think you don't want to mess with the pitching too much because they've been relatively good, and the young guys are obviously believing in DJ. And then Cowgill's been the big guy on running, and I think first base coaching has not been an issue for us. So I think you retain them as long as the manager is cool with that or doesn't have their guys. But I think you get rid of David Bell. I think it's time. I'm just tired of this. This team, these decisions are just so obviously bad from the outside looking in, even from I would call myself a fan at best. I don't know that I'm necessarily the brightest fan out there, Joe. But man, some of these decisions, I mean, the games that I've gone to, I've sat there and been like, don't pitch to this guy. Don't do this. Home run. Next pitch. Like, what are we doing? You know, that Orioles series. Just bringing in the righty against the power bat lefty. Like, just these kinds of things I'm tired of it. I can't handle it anymore, Joe.
That says a lot, because Rob is the ultimate believer, and one of those guys who would believe in David Bell through hell and high water. I'm glad you're on the right side now, Rob. Not that, again, it's not all David Bell's fault. He's had plenty of time to figure it out. He's had some good rosters. He's had some bad rosters. You have to take it all into account, and managers are only as good as their players they're given, right? And there have been some bad rosters he's had to deal with. And if you're a major league manager, a lot of your job is managing egos and managing how you do things. And I don't even think he's done that well. To put this in perspective, I do think he's a good players manager. I do think the players like him. I do think they like playing for him. That's just not always what you need. We saw that with Team USA Soccer. They had a manager who was brought back after a decent World Cup showing, but not really impressive. And now they fired him after 2 years that are now wasted, and they have 2 years to get ready for a World Cup. And then they brought him back because, the players like him. You can't always do that. That's not how it works. If the results aren't there, then you can't really sit there and expect to win by doing these things. Now, should he be fired? Yes. Will he be fired? Remains to be seen. I think they just gave him a contract. We are a small market team. We make any excuse to not spend money in the world. So I would say that, hey, well, if we fire him and hire someone else, that's 2 different contracts. It's not like something we really do. I will say there is a lot of heat on the Reds from fans right now, and as there should be. They did not do well from top to bottom. And I can see there being pressure on the front office, too, because they failed as well. And if there's pressure on the front office, they're going to be looking for a scapegoat. David Bell is that scapegoat. Because you're not getting rid of any of the young players that have actually hit. You're not going to – you might fire someone in the front office, and that's fine, but that's what's going to happen. So I would love to see changes from top down. I don't really think that's going to happen when we get a whole new front office and everything really gelling together, getting new faces in there. But I don't really expect that to happen. So I'm just saying, if he does get fired, I think it's because the front office is making him a scapegoat for this season. Again, he has his problems, but our big free agent acquisitions are Frankie Montas and Jamer Candelario. And Jamer, after that big hot stretch, has a 0 WAR. So, like, what are we doing here? So Frankie's not been the best. Jamer has been the best. It's cool that we found some nice young players, but we have failed to put together a roster that is capable of making the playoffs. We have failed to, whether you want to say it's because of the players, because of the manager, whatever. That makes it all kind of interesting to see how this goes down, because I do think, hey, he should be fired. What are the reasons he's fired? Is it because he's a scapegoat? Is it because he's actually doing a bad job? Are we going to go try to get someone who has a history of winning to help this team move to the next level? We always skimp on trying to pay for more. So, could we have gotten a better free agent this offseason to help this team? Absolutely, we could have. Could we have not given Bell the contract extension and go hire a better manager? Absolutely, we could have. Could we have gotten several more free agents? Sure, we could have. So, I boy, interested to see what happens with David Bell and see what happens to the future of this team, because there's a lot of questions here. And again, sorry to David Bell. I criticized you. You might get fired. It's not all your fault, man. I'm baseball managers are tough. We're talking right now. Yankees fans want Aaron Boone fired, and Aaron Boone is one of 3 managers all time to have a record that's above, or winning percentage above 600. So it's a tough job, but especially when you're in a small market. But I can't wait to see what happens with this. As much as I don't like people getting fired, from the job, I really just, how does this team go forward? How am I supposed to continue supporting this team if it's going to be the same thing over and over again? It's a lot of questions to be had. A lot of fans have been very upset with the ownership for the last couple of years, and honestly, rightfully so. So I'm excited to see what happens here.
Yeah, me too. And you gotta wonder, like, why are the Castellinis not selling at this point? There are plenty of people out there who can buy the Reds and actually use money. Cincinnati is growing very quickly. There are a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are coming here or already here. Like, there is money in this city. They could make baseball great again here, but they just won't. So I don't really know what to do at this point. But I think firing David Bell is a good start. And they need to not hire Derek Johnson if they do it. I don't want another Brian Price situation. Just, please God, no. Anything else. Like, or Freddie Benavides. I don't want either of them, or Larkin.
Oh boy.
Don't give me them either. Okay, and don't call up Pat Kelly from AAA. I know he just got his 2000th win. Good for him. Love that for him. He can stay there. You just go get me a young player. The teams that are doing really well, some of these teams are the ones who have the players, like former players who are managers. If Joey Votto retires at the end of this season and wants to be a manager, give him a shot. I don't care. He knows most of these players. I think he could handle it. He's got a great baseball mind. He's a great hitter. I think he's a good teacher from what I've heard. He's a little weird, but man, can you imagine how much fun it would be to have him as a manager? Can you imagine every press conference at the end of the game, Joe, would be absolutely fantastic with Joey Votto in them. So I did see Cincinnati Enquirer was a little late on it. They did put out an article about trading for Joey Votto, but he did just hurt his ankle again, so they are very behind on the times. So I think his body is just giving up on him. I think he is sadly probably donezo here, but he could come back and be a coach or a manager with this team. I know a lot of people like to see him as a broadcaster, but I'd like to see him make the Reds really good first, and then maybe he can slip into a broadcasting role at some point. But I don't know. Go get me somebody, Joe. That's just what I want. Somebody new. The new players going to be managers would be great.
I mean, it's fine. I don't think it's totally proven.
No.
And as we've seen, David Bell is a former, I think the time he was hired, he was a former player. He was just, that didn't work out. So
yeah.
But yeah, I don't really care what they do. I want a new person in here from outside the organization. That means no Barry Larkin. That means, no one who's been affiliated with us in the last couple of years. I want something fresh. I want something new. It could be a guy who's an old baseball guy who's a winner. I don't care. That'd be awesome.
That'd be great.
Someone like Joe Girardi that we talked about in the past, who's also former player, but well past his days.
Yeah.
It could be. Hey, if the Yankees are stupid and fire Aaron Boone, that's fine with me. I don't care. I don't think he's the best manager. He's given a talented lineup, but I think he is a very solid manager. It could be any number of things. It could be a young guy who gets this chance We've seen guys like David Ross have some success. We've seen Craig Counsell have some success. I don't really care what happens. I just want a fresh start. And that, again, if it's with the managing is all we can do right now is the coaching staff and the manager, that's fine. I really want a fresh start from top to bottom with the front office and see what someone can do who maybe has experience going after championships as a GM. Not just some guy who, like Nick Kroll, has made some good trades for prospects. That's great. I want someone who's going to, put everything on the table and go for it. And if it's ownership holding him back, then I want new ownership. If it's not ownership holding him back, then I want someone who's going to actually understand that if you don't have the payroll, you have to do other things. You have to do something like the Rays do, or we're going to talk about the Rays here in a little bit. They're the most impressive team in baseball over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, they made a couple World Series. They have no budget. They have a terrible stadium, and they just do really good scouting and really good evaluation. And they can't even afford players, so they ship them off after they first contract. And it's not the ideal thing, but you have to find different ways to win, and we just are not doing that. So, yes, if we go in a different direction, would love a fresh start. If it's just manager, that's fine, but I want someone who knows what they're doing and knows how to win because we just haven't had an investment in this baseball team like the fans deserve in a long, long time.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it starts here at this trade deadline, Joe. According to rumors, the Reds, like you said, are willing to trade specifically players who are on expiring contracts or, who I think are maybe a little bit on the older side. I put together a little bit of a list, Joe, of these players. And I mostly did it by contracts for the most part, but I think it's mostly relievers that we will be able to actually trade away. People are saying Candy. If somebody wants to take him, fine. I don't see the reason to trade him at this point because I don't think you're going to get enough back for it to matter, to be honest, Joe. And it's not like you're trying to get money off the books. I know he's expensive, quote unquote, but we have plenty of payroll room, so I don't understand why we would need to get rid of him. But maybe he's in a package deal. I don't know. If I'm the Reds, though, Joe, I want to rephrase this. It's not going to be a sell. It's going to be a retooling. I don't just want a sell. If there's a really good player that is available at a position of need, right field, then go get him. Go find a way to get him. Do both. Sell off some players to get some prospects from your areas of need and use some of those prospects, whether it's the new guys or some of the old ones, to get other areas of need that you currently and will currently in the future or soon future, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, near future, that's the word I'm looking for, or phrase, to go get. That's what I would like. I don't want them to just only sell. Retool. Be a buyer. They did it a couple years ago. And I've seen other teams do it. I think one of my favorite examples of it was everybody thought the Mets were going to sell all those years ago, and they went out and got Yoenis Cespedes because the A's had the right prospect group together with them, and then he ended up being a longtime player there for them, obviously. If you can find a good player, and I want to see them do both. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to give you a quick list, Joe, of the players, and I want to hear where you're at. I think Nick Martinez needs to be number one on our list to trade. He's got a player option for next year. I can't imagine he's going to be staying at this rate, but we'll see. Maybe he just really loves it here and wants to stay. But while his 7.36 ERA as a starter is awful, he has a 1.94 as a reliever with a 155 batting average against and a .53 OPS. Very, very good, honestly. So I would love to see Nick Martinez get traded, honestly, at this point. He just is a luxury that we have no need for. Frankie Montas, obviously, look, I don't know what you're going to get for him. Somebody will probably give you something. He's a nice guy who can maybe, add something to to the back end of a rotation, can eat some innings for you. Sadly, I think Jonathan India has to be on the trading board at this point, Joe. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. He's got one more year on this contract after this year. I just don't see the point. And he feels like a luxury, especially when you have just an insane amount of middle infielders that you can use for now and for the future. Now, if they really aren't confident that Matt McClain is going to be healthy even for next year, maybe you keep him, but I think he's going to be extremely valuable, to be honest with you. I think He's the kind of guy, and I don't know that he's going to want to re-sign here for the money that we'd be willing to offer him and the position that we'd be willing to offer him after next season. So I think his value is really high right now. This is probably the highest his value has been since he was a rookie. You should probably try to trade him off if you can. Lucas Sims as well has been great outside of that last outing there, and early on in the season, but he's obviously been a pretty solid reliever over the last few years. Buck Farmer has been pretty solid this year and last year. Justin Wilson, if you can get anybody to take him off our hands, seems like people are willing to trade for just about anything bullpen wise. Those are the guys who have the last year or second to last year of their contracts. Here are the other guys that I think they need to trade or look at least. What can you get for Alexis Diaz? I know he's not had a good year this year necessarily, but again, bullpens are premium. You can always remake a bullpen, though, in the offseason. Those are some of the cheapest signings that you can make, and you can get guys who are pretty solid for him. I would have put Brent Suter on here, but he just went on the IL, and I don't know that he's going to be available to get traded. And then lastly, Fernando Cruz. I'm tired of watching him go out there and give up runs late in games right now, Joe. He had an awesome stretch. I think people are still going to be obsessed with his splitter, and they may be willing to overlook the last couple weeks in order to go get him, but I'm ready to sell. He's 34 years old. There's no reason for you to keep him at this point. Bullpen pieces are a luxury. Now, I know this is like, well, you're selling off the entire bullpen. I'm not saying sell everybody. I'm saying this is the area where you draw from. And from Jonathan India, again, we have a lot of infielders. Look, man, I know it's not going to be fun, but you end up having to put Santiago Espinal out there at second base until Matt McLean comes back. That is just kind of what it is for right now. If we're giving up on this season, that seems like the way that you could do it. You could package him with some players and maybe, trade him for an outfielder or something. I don't know. But those are the guys that I had ideas on, Joe. Where are you at with some of them? Or all of them?
Yeah, different philosophies here. I would sell. I would not try to retool. I think the prices are usually too high for those players. And that is why I think you get the players off the books, off of your own books, and then you free up some money to spend next offseason with that money that you have saved by trading these players away, and also get prospects in the process. That's the best way to go about it. Now, the problem is the Reds sometimes trade for these prospects, and then they don't do the second part, which is go sign free agents with all the monies that they just accumulated. That's the way you should do it if you're a Major League Baseball team. If you can retool and get some guys who are active, that's great. It's not typical. It's not something we see very regularly. So here we go. I am big on trading Jeimer Candelario. Get the money off the books. I think we're going to have bigger issues with him down the road than we do even right now. He's been fine this year for a team that has been struggling, but for next year, if we're trying to win, I don't think he's a guy who's really going to have that big of an impact, especially with how he's played this year. So, get him off the books, trade whatever you can get, even if it's just, lower level prospects. I would do that. Nick Martinez, I'll sum it up pretty easily here. I would trade every pitcher is on the block besides our top three starting pitchers. That includes all the bullpen. That includes any of the, Graham Ashcraft. That includes Frankie Montas. You get whatever you can. We have our three starters. We can go fill those fourth and fifth starter spots for decent money, not a lot of money free agent wise. And bullpens, not just Rob that they're cheap, but they change year to year. Like there's unless you have a closer who's dynamite, there's guys who are bad one year, good the next. We're seeing that with Fernando Cruz. Like he has never been good, and all of a sudden, age 34, he figures it out. And really, it might have just been 10 or so appearances where he was good, and also. Like he still has this quirk where he can only get guys out if he comes in when they're on base. But if he has a clean inning where he comes in, he's just awful. I don't know what happens with that, but that's just a mental thing or something. So yeah, any pitcher I'm willing to give up besides the top three, or people like I don't want to give up Brett Lauder or those guys either.
No.
Let's see. I'm not a fan of trading Jonathan India right now. We are seeing right now that if we do trade Jeimer, India has proven he can play some other positions in the infield. That'd be nice, especially because Jeimer is not the best defensive infielder, as we've found out this year. But also, Marte is bad. Marte is bad right now. Doesn't mean he can't get better. It doesn't mean, like you said, Rob, he's cracking under the pressure. So there's a world next year where if Marte doesn't figure it out by the end of the year, and he has the rest of the year to figure it out, don't get me wrong, you might be looking at an India, McLean, Ellie infield, second, third, and short. And that's still in play. So I think if you have him under contract, I consider keeping India for that reason. I'd rather get rid of Candy because he is more expensive. He is a guy who is playing worse than India this year. That's what I would do. But again, I think everyone but your young guys are on the block. I still consider an India a young guy, even though he's not the youngest. I think that's the thing is you have to look at getting rid of payroll and hopefully going and spending some of it to get guys who we don't just give passes of like, hey, we signed Frankie Montas. He's not the same. He's not the same that he once was. Jamer, Jamer I thought would be a lot better this year, and it's just not good enough. We need to go get a big name, a big player, a guy who can produce at this ballpark, whether pitcher or hitter. And I think that is the way to go about it: is just selling these guys, repatching the bullpen next year, and hopefully having more health and also having more free agents to help with this team. Not just, oh, we have a lot of depth, and that depth is, oh, there might be a Major League Baseball good, there might be AAA good, but guys who can actually push things forward and be stars in this league, or at least above average players, because we don't have many of those right now. If you look at our roster and just you look at WAR or whatever you want to look at it, we don't have many guys who are above average, who are really helping put this team forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, get rid of Candy if you want to. I think that's fine. You've convinced me on India. That's fine. I just don't know that he's going. I guess he still has ARB3 in 2026. I did miss that.
Yep.
All right. So you can keep India. That's fine with me. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, it's tough. It is really tough to figure out what they're going to do right now. I don't envy the front office. I'll put it that way. This just feels like a really unfortunate situation to be in, to be honest with you, because there are just a lot of things that you cannot control. Yeah, I think you got to get rid of Frankie. I think. I don't know who else, man. I mean, I think it's just them, the bullpen. You know, I mean, if somebody's willing to take Emilio Pagan while he's injured, can take care of him too. You're going to be getting Ian Jabot back. Sam Mole's been fine. I guess Sam Mole might be a really interesting one too. But the problem is if I'm the Reds, I'd be keeping him for sure just because he's shown consistently over the last few years that he's solid. And you got him until 2028. So basically the rest of his career almost. So you might as well just keep him. But it is wild to me. I don't really know what to do with this team because the active payroll right now is only $75 million. That's where I was just like, I just don't know. Like, if you can get that money back from the Candy stuff, then fine. But, yeah, you know, he's hitting to right about his average, Joe. You know, he's hitting between 230, 240. The only thing that's really gone up for him has been his home runs. He's not been bad. Like, that's the problem, is he's not been terrible. If he walked just a tiny bit more, I'd be happy. But, like, he's not worth the money that we're giving him. I think if you could have gotten him for $10 million, I don't think people would be complaining as much. But, you know, it just, yeah, I mean, the problem is I just think that India is more valuable. I just don't know what you're going to get for Candy is the problem. And maybe I'm wrong. Was it the Nationals that traded him for not a decent haul, but let me see here. Nationals trade.
And you're not wrong either. By the way, I think you would get more value for India, but if we're talking about if you want this team to compete next year, I'm not sure trading a guy who's actually hitting the ball is going to help when everyone else is seemingly struggling to hit the ball. So that's kind of my thought process. He's still young and controllable. Jamer, not near the end of his career, but he's definitely getting up there in years, and also
he's 30.
Just hasn't really found his stride with us. I would rather shed all that extra payroll that he has coming in rather than India's, and actually have India, a guy that I think we feel pretty confident as a starter for next year. If you have him, McLean, and Ellie in the infield, I think that's a pretty good starting infield. And then you figure out, obviously first base, probably CES to start, and then you see if maybe you can sign someone else who can play first base as well, just in case CES doesn't figure it out. But since he has struggled this year too, it's just those. I mean, honestly, CES and Marte struggling when they did have their time, while it has been shortened seasons for both, really puts more of this trade deadline on a question mark because you're right. Like if those guys are killing it, then you do trade India. That makes total sense, and someone's going to give you a lot. But if you're trying to win next year, I can't trust Marte to start every day. I can't trust CES to start every day right now. I don't think that's really logical. But if they're trying to do a full rebuild, I don't think that's technically the case because they're going to keep their three starters in Ellie and Matt McLean. Maybe that would be the move. I don't know.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, there's just a lot of, again, there are certain guys that I wouldn't mind them keeping. I think there are some role guys. You got to think about Friedel too. What are we going to do with him? I guess I thought Stu Fairchild was younger, but He's 28, so I guess maybe he and Fraley. I mean, maybe even look at dealing Fraley here. I mean, it's just tough because like you want to keep Ellie, Steer, Stevenson. I think you should keep TJ Friedel personally. But he's 28 now too, so he'll be 29 actually here later too. So I don't know. I mean, it's tough, Joe. It's tough. I do not envy them. I think that they should maybe just put everybody on the block and see what people are willing to offer. And if you can get some good stuff for them, do it. And if you have too many prospects, then fine. Trade from them this offseason and use the money like you said that they're going to have. Just get Abbott under a contract. Maybe Lodolo if you feel comfortable that he's going to be healthy. Get Ellie. Sign him to one of the biggest deals possible. I mean, I know he's going to be on the team for a while. I don't remember when he officially comes off the books, but or officially would be even available. But he's still pre-arb for the next 2 years. So I'd have to imagine, Joe, that he's going to be on the team till he's like 28. Because I think it's, yeah. So we got 6 more years of Ellie after this. So you got some of your young guys. Guys, it's tough. I mean, if you can't tell, even both of us are struggling because we don't really know what to say or do. But I can guarantee you this much. By the time that we talk here in 2 weeks at a minimum, the Reds will have made a move. Maybe we'll do a trade deadline show once the Reds have made some moves, especially if there's anything of significance. We'll talk about that as well, and we'll let you guys know. But I don't know. You got any other thoughts on the trades, Joe? I think we've done a pretty good job of. Well, I don't know if we've done a good job, but we've at least said our thoughts.
Yeah, I think we have some different strategies going in, but either way, I think the move now has to be trade guys. And if you trade guys who are on big contracts or guys who we don't expect to be here next year, like Frankie, in the end, it's a win. Like we're not going to the playoffs. Frankie gets a new place where maybe he can go make the playoffs. We're going to clear the books. We're going to get a chance to use more of our money. We're probably going to get some prospects in return. And I think the good news is we found that even some of these trades we don't think are very good for prospects end up being good. Like the Tyler Malley trade, really great for us. Better than the Sonny Gray trade was. So it's just, not just because one player has more value doesn't mean you're going to get the same trade in return. That's just how baseball works. So excited to see how this goes. Again, I would be selling just about everyone besides your young stars. And that means there's a lot of people who could be traded, even guys, like you said, the outfield, we could be trading some of those guys. And, even though they've done a good job filling in for what we thought would be probably a more healthy outfield, healthy infield too, but it's where we're at, man. So I'm hoping that we can make some moves. And, hey, if we trade some pitchers, the one thing we do know is we have some good young pitchers now that we have Rhett Lauder, Chase Burns. We have some guys that we can bring up in the next couple of years that should be, because they played college baseball, should be ready.
Very soon.
If not next year, 2 years from now. Something like that. So, Good stuff.
I'll say this. Do not just give away, guys. One. That's my last 2 things. Don't just give away, guys. And I'm willing to say there are only 6 guys at this point for sure that I would not be willing to trade. Well, 7, I guess, because I'm not willing to give up on Marte yet. He's 22. I think he has plenty of time to figure it out. But Ellie, Steer, Stevenson, and the 3 pitchers. Anybody else, do what you got to do. And that includes CES even, to be honest with you, as much as I like him. I just think, I don't know. I guess you could keep him. There you go. 8. I rethought about that one.
Well,
changed my mind.
I mean, you're not
you can't
wrong.
because he's injured.
In an optimal world, in an optimal world, you're not going to want to trade those guys anyway. I mean, the value isn't there. I mean, could someone blow you away because they scouted him couple of years ago and they really like the person, think they can unlock him, sure, but really you're not going to get anything for those guys. The move is definitely keep them and see if they can develop, while at the same time trading other guys for prospects who are going to compete with them, and hopefully we can find someone who will fill in and play really well at those positions, whether it's those guys or someone else.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. All right, the next thing here is we're going to dive into the Chase Burns signing. I don't have the exact numbers on here, but here we go. It was a $9.25 million draft bonus record, or draft bonus, which is a record, beating out Paul Skeens. That does show you, obviously, how much of a jump the bonuses have been, but apparently the Reds also just really love Chase Burns, Joe. I mean, if they're willing to spend that kind of money on him, in my mind, dude, then that to me shows that they expect him to be up there with our guys. Again, if Abbott ends up being our fourth starter in this rotation, or even our fifth best starter in this rotation, then we are cooking. I mean, truly, we have to have, at that point, if we don't have a top 5 rotation in baseball, then baseball has just gotten insane. And I don't really know what we would do about it. But then you have 5 guys for at least 4 to 5 years with each other that could just really be insane, Joe. I mean, that's pretty mind-blowing to me that they felt that. And I know that there are slot numbers and everything like that, but being willing to break the all-time record is not something I've seen the Reds willing to do in past years.
It's very odd, too, because Travis Mazzano, the first pick in the draft, reportedly wasn't going to be drafted by the Guardians because they weren't going to agree on the value of the pick, because there's slots you can pay them, but it's different. It's still different with how you negotiate it. And he ended up signing below slot value, I believe, or below what he could have gotten at the very least. So it's very weird that the number 1 pick did that, and we're doing this with Chase Burns. Good for him for getting the contract. I don't understand it from the Reds' perspective of going above and beyond for a pitcher that is not Paul Skeens, and when the first pick doesn't go above, I don't understand it, but I will leave that to them to figure out. I do love Chase Burns as a prospect. I do think the future of the Reds is building up these arms, especially with all the arm injuries we're seeing with pitchers, and even other injuries like Nick Lodolo has, different injuries in the last couple of years. Getting more arms is not a bad thing. I think if this does work out, it does make things a lot more flexible for how this roster is built, too, because if you have even 4 of these guys make the big leagues and they're all together at the same time, even if Brett Lauder, Chase Burns isn't up there by the time everyone else is there, you have to put in a 5th starter, no big deal, 5th starter, who cares? You can start spending money on some of the positions we need in the field that are outside of those young guys. It does make it a lot easier. So I'm excited for Chase Burns. I still haven't seen any word, Rob. I don't know if you have either, about whether they plan on shutting him down like they did Brett Lauder last year.
I had seen something. They said that there are innings still left, is what they said. But they were going to put him in the Arizona complex and see what happens. I think that the Reds, honestly, I truly think that they're going to try to bring up, I think they want to have a battle next year for the starting rotation. I don't want to get too far ahead of things, but I think they want to throw Lauder out there. I think they want to throw Burns out there. I think they're hoping that what's his face down in AAA gets it together. I know he's not in AAA anymore. Connor Phillips. I think they're hoping that he figures it out. I'm thinking they're hoping that Brandon Williamson is healthy. I think Carson Spires is a dark horse, honestly. And then I think they're going to keep Ashcraft. So I think they're going to have 10 guys going for 5 spots. 10 legitimately could be at least above average guys. Could be. Above average guys going for those 5 spots next year, with really only Lodolo, Green, and Abbott being the main guys. So I guess 7 going for the last 2 spots there, 7 going for the last 2 spots there. So that's fun to me. That's exciting, because if they're letting him pitch now, I think they're prepped because they think he's ready to go for next season.
And don't be surprised if they do sign another pitcher, whether it's an ace or even a guy who we think is going to be like a 2 or 3 starter.
Yep.
So it could be 7 people for one last spot, and maybe some of these guys end up filling out the bullpen. Maybe that works. Where, like I mentioned with Graham Ashcraft, he has trouble with going into the second time around in order. Third time around in order, it gets worse. Maybe he's a bullpen guy. Maybe it's one of these other guys that we're looking at, like Brandon Williamson or Carson Spires, bullpen experience there. I mean, that if you trade your Frankie Montas, you trade some of your bullpen guys this year, that's a lot more fun for next year to figure out who's going to be that 5th starter, 4th starter if we don't get an A. You sign someone, and then also who's in the bullpen. It could be a good bullpen too with some of these guys some of them have some good stuff, but they not able to unleash it because they're starters. So
I would love it. I think Graham Ashcraft may end up being a bullpen guy. I think that is very real. He has the stuff, I think, to be a bullpen guy. I think he could be a guy throwing 98 on a consistent basis from the bullpen with that ridiculous slider that he has as well. I would love to see it. So we'll see, but it is interesting. Yeah, Chase Burns, great signing overall. I know maybe a little bit too much money, but it wasn't that much over, to be clear. I think it was like $1.5 million or something like that over what was the expected slot. So If it's $1.5 million to get your guy that you really want to make sure that he is signed, happy, and ready to roll potentially even for next season, at least in double or triple A, then yeah, I would say go get your guy, do what you got to do. This team has money to spend. Let's stop screwing around with it. Last thing here, Joe, Reds 2025 schedule came out. Sorry, guys, very busy week for the Reds, even though they only played 3 games. We'll get into the games here in just a minute. They are starting off against the San Francisco Giants at home, and they get the Rangers at home before heading on the road to the Brewers and the Giants as well. Joe, it's interesting to me looking at this whole schedule because, well, mainly because of the fact that the Reds do not have any really true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like true West Coast trips this year. A lot of them are like partial West Coast trips in this coming season. I will be honest with you, I'm kind of pumped about it. I know, again, we're not trying to give up fully on talking about this season, but for next year, Joe, this schedule is really, really interesting to me. I think they did a much better job at spreading things out. It's not, even the commentators, I think it was the Cowboy, was talking about, it's just weird that every other week we're playing the same team. I think this year was the first year on that kind of that new schedule. I think this next year they got to figure it out a little bit more, Joe. What are your initial thoughts on it? We obviously can't, we're not going to dive into it too much. We'll do it next year, but where are you at with it?
Yeah, first thing I looked for was those long West Coast road trips. Not too many. There's a couple, I think 7 or 8 game ones we have, maybe 9.
We have one 9-game
but
one in
it's the first thing I did when I saw this. Yeah, so that's the first thing I looked for because we got so. Our momentum got screwed up by that with the early season ones. I think we have 2 in the late season for next year that are going to be tough to deal with, but that's what I looked for first. I mean, the way the schedule is, like most of the matchups stay the same. Might be talking to my family about possibly going back to Boston to see the Reds play the Red Sox. Would be kind of cool. That's a cool trip if anyone wants to see it. But that's what I usually do. I usually look for West Coast road trips just to see if we're going to get screwed by something or see different games that I might be able to go to or have interest in going to. And it's going to see a game at Fenway would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I've been to Fenway. I can tell you it's very worth it. I haven't been in almost 20 years, but it's awesome.
I went 5 years ago. It was no Reds game, but it was a Red Sox game. It's awesome. It's probably I think Fenway and Camden Yards are my 2 favorite baseball stadiums, so I would love to go back.
Camden is, I think, my all-time number 1. One of the most beautiful ballparks I've ever been to. I've been to it 3 or 4 times. Love it. Absolutely love it. I did get to go to the Coliseum, by the way, as well, before they shut that down. So that was quite the experience. All right, we'll move on. That's schedule stuff. The Reds will be playing the Atlanta Braves. Now, the Atlanta Braves are not as good as we would think, Joe. They are, I think it's 10 games over 500. They're second in their division behind the Phillies. They own the number 1 wild card spot. The Reds have somehow not played the Braves yet until the second half of the season, which is wild. But for right now, the Reds are going to be throwing Hunter Green. I don't know if Spires is eligible to come back yet, Joe, but I think it's ultimately going to end up being a Martinez game if it's not Spires in that game 5, which is disappointing to say the least because it may hurt his trade value. If I were the Reds, I would say nope and just make it a bullpen day, but we'll have to see. Frankie Montas will be going in game 3. Their closer, old friend Raisel Iglesias, is having a great season, 22 of 24. He's got a batting average against of under 100. He has looked excellent, so you do not want to get to him. The lineup is something like this. Jared Kelnick, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Marcel Ozuna, Eddie Rosario, Adam Duvall, Sean Murphy, Orlando Arcia, and with a bench of Travis d'Arnaud, Eli White, Zach Short, Ramon Laureano, and they signed Whit Merrifield. You may be wondering, where are Ozzy Albies and Ronald Acuna? Well, Acuna has been hurt and is out for the season. And Ozzy Albies last night, Joe, I believe, broke his wrist and is out for pretty much the rest of the season as well. So, look, this team is still very good. You cannot underestimate them even without 2 very good players. They have a lot of power. Marcell Ozuna is having an insane season, Joe. Their starters have been great. They revived Chris Sale's career. He looks absolutely incredible, and I think we're getting Sale in Game 3, which sucks. That is very unfortunate. And then, Ronaldo Lopez has been their best pitcher this year, and we got to get him in Game 1. He's got an under 2 ERA, Joe. He has been absolutely insane for this team, and really he's been insane for the majority of his career, but mostly as a reliever. It's been as a starter this year that he's been doing really well. I'm very afraid of this team, Joe. I'm just going to come out and say right now I'm going 1-2 because I think the Reds will find a way to win one game, but I think that the fall is coming and is going to continue. So I do not see them going into Atlanta and doing very well. But hey, we said the same thing about the Dodgers series, and then they went out and they swept the freaking Dodgers. So and they did the same thing against the Yankees. They did the same thing against the Phillies. I don't know. This team is just really weird, but I'm going 1-2. I think, especially with the rumors that they are willing to trade, I think that that'll get to the players, and I think the wind may be out of their sails, as they say.
Yeah, 1-2 for me too. Not just Ozzy Albies and Ronald Acuna out. We have Michael Harris out for them.
True.
Spencer Strider, Max Fried, two of their best pitchers. This would be a perfect opportunity if we were competing to play this team, because when they're fully healthy, they are so good. And as we said, this is the model I want the Reds to build: is sign these young guys to long contracts and lock them up. So you can build around them like the Braves have done so well. And obviously, bigger markets are able to do a little bit more with their money, but. Yeah, very good team, even with the injuries. Even so, like you said, Chris Sale having a good year, Ronaldo Lopez. It's going to be tough still. So I'm going to go 1-2. If we were playing better, there is a world where I would pick 2-1. I probably wouldn't pick 3-0 on the road against the Braves without how much talent they have. But just unfortunate that we aren't in a better position to take advantage of some of the Braves' injury issues right now.
Yeah, because they do have a big swing and miss team as well. Kelnick, Riley, Olsen, Ozuna, Rosario, Duvall, literally every single person in their lineup is a big strikeout person. Riley may actually be one of their least strikeout guys. This team is they're just good, dude. I mean, they have 2 starting catchers that are potentially top 10 catchers. Darno's just getting, a nice time these last few years of just, I don't know, being the backup guy, getting in when he can. And he's still, I think, a very solid catcher overall. So, it's going to be tough. We'll have to hope that maybe the Reds can pull something off here, but there's not much to dive into with this one, Joe. It's just going to be go to Atlanta and do the best you can. And if they find a way to sweep, then maybe we can rekindle talks about a different strategy during the trade deadline. But for now, Joe, I just think that these next 2 series, I think, will probably end it for us, because we're also going to go up against the Rays, who, again, if we had actually won 2 out of 3 in Washington, this would be a team as well, Joe, that we are, I think, at least even with, right? They are 50-49 this season. We are going to have Lodolo, Abbott, and Green going in this series, Joe, in Tampa. Closer Pete Fairbanks has been solid this year. You got to line up somewhat. They changed up a lot. Richie Palacios, Isaac Paredes, Brandon Lowe, Randy Rosarina, Josh Lowe, old friend Jose Siri, Ben Rortvedt? I think it's something like that. Jose Caballero, Taylor Walls, Alex Jackson, Yandy Diaz, Ahmed Rosario, Curtis Mead, and Johnny DeLuca. Look, this team can't hit very well. Their bullpen is better than their starters, but Taj Bradley has been pretty solid for them. This is a very typical Rays team. I have heard they are selling, though, Joe. That is what the rumors have been. By the time we face them, there's even a chance that they have traded somebody. So, I don't know where you're at with this team, Joe. I guess I'll let you start here, especially with the starters that we have going against them.
Yeah, this is a team that I think has underachieved. I mean, the Rays, I'll put it this way. They usually overachieve, so the expectation is they would overachieve again. They have not done that a lot. Of guys have not had good seasons. I talk about Randy Rosarena, they're probably most notable player. He has not had a great season overall, hitting 212 now. I don't think if he hits 50 points better, which isn't too weird to expect of them. This team could have a better record. They're also in a very tough division with the Yankees and Orioles both killing it this year. So I don't know. This is a series that I would probably pick 2-1, especially given the three pitchers we have going. I don't know who's going to be on either team at this point is the problem. I'll say 1-2 again for this one. I do think there's a chance we go 2-1. I'm looking for Yandy Diaz and Randy Arozarena to be moved more specifically than anyone else on this team as they start their rebuild process and understand their limitations as they're not making the playoffs in a division that has the Orioles and Yankees and even the Red Sox who aren't having the best season either. So I'll go 1-2. If we were playing better again, I'd probably go higher. Lodolo can't get out of the fourth inning these days. Abbott and Green have had issues with run support. 1-2.
Okay, yeah, I've been swinging between 2-1 and 1-2. I think I'm gonna go 1-2 as well, just because we're on the road. I think if they were coming to our place, I'd pick 2-1. But, yeah, man, I mean, it's just tough. I mean, they've got a solid bullpen. I think they'll be moving some bullpen pieces as well. It is wild to me that bullpen is at such a premium when I think there are a lot of good bullpen pieces that are available from some of these bad teams. But we'll have to see if maybe that changes. I think this trade deadline is going to be very interesting because so many teams are still in it. Again, the Reds are literally a 3-0 sweep, Joe, from being 2 games out and potentially changing everything. It is that significant. Like, this Reds team could just as easily go 6-0 this week, Joe, and be back at 500 as they could go 0-6. Like, they really are that unpredictable right now. I shouldn't say 0-6. They'd normally find a way to win one game at least, so 1-5. But you know what I mean. It's really interesting. If they did go 6-0, they would probably be one game out of the wild card spot at that point, and I think we'd be looking at Monday, Tuesday as very different days. But I just don't think they're going to be able to do it. I think they're going to drop 2 more games, and I think they'll be 8 games under at that point, and that's just going to end the season, truly at that point. So I don't know, guys. Let us know what you think of this, all of this. It's a very coin flippy type of next few days for the Reds. I mean, if the Reds really and David Bell really think that they can make a run, because Ellie said at the All-Star break that he anticipates them making a run to the playoffs this year, then somebody's got to step up and somebody's got to sit these guys down and be like, hey, if you want it, go out and get it. You know what I mean? Like, just, I mean, if Krall has to come down and do a money ball, a Brad Pitt's money ball, a Billy Bean money ball, and come down and yell at the players to get it together, then do it. I want to see some fire from this team. And if they go and they hustle and they just play their hearts out and they find a way to get back in the race, then go. Get them some players. There are going to be people available. But if not, then take advantage of the fact that there are a lot of teams that are right there in the playoffs that might be willing to give up a little bit more than you would think, because that wild card spot is open on both sides of baseball right now. In a very major way, Joe. So, you got any last words of wisdom for us before we hop off?
No, just about to point that out. That, we might be getting higher prices for our players because there might be more teams unwilling to sell right now. I mean, there's still so much up in the air, especially in the National League. So if you're a team like the Pirates or a half a game out and you even lose a couple games this week, do you make some trades? Do you do you try to go for it? That type of thing. You're right. There's only 2 teams in the National League who are completely out of it, as opposed to the AL, where there's probably 5-ish teams out of it. This week's going to decide a lot for that, and it could be a good week for us trade-wise because you're right. The Reds could go win 6 games, could be back in the picture and everything. I'm expecting them to be in the trade market, and if you have teams that have not had much success, like the Pirates, or you have teams that like Chicago Cubs, who are right there 4 games or 3.5 games out of the wild card spot, where they don't like telling their fans they're not good. They don't like doing the rebuild thing. They don't like that at all because their fans get mad. There's going to be a lot of teams looking for some players, and we have plenty of players to supply them with, specifically the bullpen, as you mentioned, which is seeing good prices. So if someone wants to take a chance on a Lucas Sims, who I have my issues with, or a Fernando Cruz, who can't come in for a clean inning, or an Alexis Diaz, who walks someone every single time he goes in for a save, wants to tweak it and fix it, we will sign us up. We'll take those trades. We will be fine. And next year we'll come back and hopefully be strong.
Yeah, look, guys, here's what I'm going to tell you is even the Nationals at this point, they go on a bit of a winning streak here. They could be right back in it. Like, there are a lot of teams right now. You got, and the Reds are going to have to be willing to trade within the division is going to be the last thing I'm going to say, Joe. They have to be willing to trade it within the division because some of the best prospects you could get could be from the Cardinals, the Pirates, or the Cubs. And like you said, this Cubs team was expected to be a lot better than they are right now. There are players that they have that I think the Reds should be interested in. The Pirates especially have players that the Reds should be interested in. And if you really have to, go to the NL or go to the AL, man. The Yankees are struggling. They'll probably take anything that they can get. Go grab somebody. They've got some good prospects down there. Twins, Royals, Red Sox, Mariners. I don't think we need pitching from the Mariners anymore, so maybe not them. But anybody else that has hitting, I think, specifically available to them, the Reds should take a look at. Even if the Tigers or the Rangers somehow get back in it, then go look around. But I want to see the Reds make some smart moves, some good moves, and hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully it'll still be fun by the end of the season for us. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us, Joe. So with that, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.